What if Boruto isn't rewriting destiny, but instead he might be sabotaging it? What if every so-called shortcut that he takes is really just making the future worse? And what if it brings Momoshiki one step closer to controlling everything, getting a second chance to do the one thing he's always wanted, to harvest a chakra fruit? First, Boruto convinced Kawaki to break his limiters early, get them removed, destroying all of Kashin Koji's very carefully laid plans in the process, because the timeline changed. Now Boruto is turning to the last person he should ever trust, Momoshiki Otsutsuki, and this isn't just a strategy we're talking about. This is really and truly Boruto's greatest flaw, a flaw that Masashi Kishimoto himself revealed to us back in 2015, 10 years ago exactly. And if Boruto keeps repeating the same mistake like he's doing, the consequences, they could be catastrophic. Boruto may have just triggered a second major timeline shift, and it could cost him everything. Join me in today's newest Naruto Explained video where your OBC, your original Boruto chief, breaks down for you how Boruto might be playing with a fire on a cosmic level with this deal that he's made with Momoshiki, and why Kashin Koji is clearly not about to be the biggest fan of what he's seeing once he gets his next timeline update via the 10 directions and sees what it is that Boruto's done. Also, if you haven't already, make sure to check out the chapter review, which is up on the channel currently, and I'll leave it in the end credits and the description box to anyone who's not seen it for your convenience, which I highly recommend given there's a ton of cultural stuff in this chapter, and Viz Media does not do translator notes for most of its manga, including Boruto, so some stuff, no pun intended, got lost in translation. So the first timeline change we had, as a reminder, there was a shift that took place. Boruto approached Kawaki, urging him, hey fam, get those limiters off early. This is a conclusion you would have eventually got to yourself. It won't change anything if you do it now, which ironically it did. He was hoping for a stronger Kawaki that could assist him in taking down Jura. Kashin Koji, using 10 directions, had foreseen multiple paths, but none of them included Boruto altering events so soon after getting that information from Kashin Koji. By acting early and in a way that Kashin Koji could not predict, because again, 10 directions is based on probability, Boruto created an entirely new timeline, invalidating everything that Koji had carefully predicted. They were on a very set linear time, striving towards having everything line up to where Jura could be taken down. Boruto threw a wrench in all of that, hence the new update. Kawaki even warned Boruto after Boruto told him to get his limiters removed. He said, hey man, this ain't gonna work. I gotta taste that guy's true power, and even if I gotta power up like you're saying, I don't think it's gonna work. And Kawaki said, hey, I just need to buy you time, right? Because Boruto said, well, we'll adjust our plan. And sure enough, his strength, it was not enough to take down Jura. Jura pulled out a book and started reading that shit on him. He was not taking Kawaki seriously. As a result, Boruto, his shortcut, it backfired, and Koji's foresight, it became useless. Every safe future that he had been preparing for, trying to structure towards Jura's defeat, yeah, that thing got wiped out. And this is the punchline to the whole situation. Boruto thought he could skip the struggle, but in doing so, he erased certainty itself. And this brings me to the second timeline change that is in the process of occurring now, in my opinion. With Boruto now approaching Momoshiki, asking to borrow his power in exchange for his body once Jura's defeated with some conditions. This is a massive contradiction to Kashin Koji's entire strategy we've seen. Koji has tried to keep Boruto away from relying on karma because of the risk of Momoshiki's takeover. When Momoshiki's karma seal cut on, when Boruto's inside of Konoha, he was freaking out, telling him to get away because Momoshiki would take over and Boruto would lose control. By doing this, Boruto may be making a second major timeline change, one even riskier than the first, because he's again acting in a way different than what Kashin Koji foresaw. Unlike Kawaki's limiters, Momoshiki is unpredictable. Once he's in control, he has instant access to things like Flying Raijin, Uzuhiko Rasengan, Boruto's entire arsenal that he learned under Sasuke, because as Sasuke said, he taught Boruto everything he could teach him, meaning As long as it didn't require a Sharingan to use, Boruto learned it. With 1,000 years of experience, Momoshiki in theory could weaponize Boruto's body far beyond anything Boruto himself has achieved. We saw as much when he turned the compression Rasengan into a Rasengan bullet. This isn't just about Boruto altering the timeline. It's literally about him inviting chaos into it. And that brings me to what chaos destroys: Kashin Koji's carefully laid strategies. Koji is a critical thinker and he is a strategic planner. His 10 directions ability depends on probability and predictions. He sees all possible outcomes and he takes that information and comes up with a plan to try to steer things towards a favorable outcome. But Boruto is a wild card. By making rash decisions, Boruto has undone every stable future that Koji foresaw, and there was foreshadowing for it, because when Boruto was told how 10 directions worked, he's like, hey, why can't we share this information with everyone to create a favorable outcome? He's not fully grasped the severity of what it is that he's doing, and it makes sense. Boruto is a genius, he is a prodigy, and yet at the same time, Boruto is still a naive child. Even worse, Kashin Koji now faces the nightmare trying to calculate another future where Momoshiki's active, potentially being far too chaotic to be mapped out, because in theory this should create another timeline, unless we find out Koji told Boruto to go to Momoshiki. In essence, Boruto's shortcuts, they don't just endanger himself, they destabilize Koji's entire role as a singularity of fate who is meant to guide Boruto, and he's supposed to keep Boruto alive long enough to take down Jura. And that brings me to Boruto's fatal character flaw and the crux of this entire video. So back in 2015, again 10 years ago, depending on when you see this, this would have been 10 years ago to the date. So Kishimoto said, I quote, would not call him lazy. He's more refined than that. It's more that he knows all the shortcuts. He's crafty, end quote. This is Boruto's defining trait. He looks for the fastest solution, not the hardest, but the most reliable one. It's not that he seeks out the shortcuts, it's just more that Boruto knows where they are. Instead of going A, B, C, D, Boruto goes, okay, so A's the first letter, Z's the last letter, screw going through all the alphabet in order. I'm just gonna go straight to Z. And even though Sasuke's training and Kashin Koji's training was about having Boruto learn basics, we know just based off of Sasuke, his last words to Boruto, it was to, again, keep on refining what he taught him, meaning that Boruto still has a tendency every now and then to just skip to the end because he has such a firm grasp on everything, and yet because he skipped some of the basics, things are incomplete. That is Boruto's defining trait. For instance, he thought that Kawaki's limiters would be a shortcut to taking down Jura as fast as possible. He was wrong. Kawaki knew as much once he heard that theory. Hey, so you mean if I get my power taken off? Nah, fam. I tasted this guy's full power. You're underestimating? Sure enough, Jura was a lot stronger than both of them. Now he thinks that Momoshiki making that deal with him might be the shortcut needed to take down Jura. He's potentially wrong again. Boruto appears to learn this lesson, but then he has a tendency to repeat it. Think back to part 1 of Boruto. If you read the manga, screw the anime. If you read the manga, what's a recurring theme that you see with Boruto's character? He had a tendency to lower his guard. In every single arc, Boruto had to learn, do not let your guard down. Sasuke taught it to him when Sasuke caught him in the alley and he basically tripped him up. Shojoji taught it to him because Boruto lowered his guard and Shojoji put him in the bear hug. Naruto taught it to him during their sparring match, and Konohamaru had to pay the price for it because Boruto lowered his guard during that owl fight. Boruto had to be saved by Konohamaru, and Konohamaru was hit with that laser beam. Each time Boruto had to learn the lesson, it just got a little bit more severe than the time prior to that. Sasuke was like, hey fam, keep your guard up. Shojoji put him in a situation where Boruto was uncomfortable. Naruto humiliated him. Konohamaru was almost killed trying to save him. See how things kept escalating. Now with the timeline shifts, if this is indeed another timeline change, then following that same pattern that Ikimoto likes to write with, this should lead to something slightly worse than the last timeline chain. Boruto's arc, it really reflects real life when you think about it from that perspective, in particular the teenage years, where mistakes are made and they're repeated until the consequences become impossible to ignore. Boruto's arc, it isn't about being lazy, it's about learning the value of patience and struggle and long-term effort instead of quick fixes. In a way, it is a continuation of his character arc from part 1. And that's not bad writing. Even when you look at Boruto's own father, Naruto, he didn't just come into the Naruto time skip. So volume 28 all the way up to volume 72, technically 73 when you count Naruto Gaiden, Naruto still had some of the flaws from part 1 of Naruto. It took him until the last third of the manga to really hammer out some of those major ones. In real life, shortcuts, they don't just fail, they oftentimes make things worse. And that brings me to, again, the massive consequence that's probably coming. Every time Boruto takes a shortcut, the stakes are going to raise. The first shortcut, Kawaki's limiters got removed and Jura found out that Naruto was alive. The second shortcut, Momoshiki's power. That could backfire catastrophically. If Momoshiki takes over Boruto, he doesn't just risk losing a fight. That's the least of his worries. He risks potentially losing himself, losing his identity, and everything that Kashin Koji planned and everything that his friends are fighting for. This could be one of the massive consequences, or the massive consequence, that Boruto finally needs to experience in order to understand that shortcuts, they come with a price that's too heavy to pay. Boruto isn't just fighting Jura or Kawaki or even Momoshiki. You could argue right now Boruto's biggest enemy is himself. He's fighting himself, his own impatience, his own temptation to take the easy path. And the scary thing, every time he chooses a shortcut, the timeline's changing all over again. And the future becomes less predictable, more dangerous. The first time cost him Kashin Koji's carefully laid strategy and Jura knowing that Kawaki knows where Naruto is, that Naruto's still alive. The second time may cost him potentially his very soul. It won't get to that, but you can see that's what's being dangled out there. And maybe that's what's going to take, because sometimes we only learn things the hard way. Now we just have to ask ourselves, has Boruto doomed himself in the second timeline? Or could this be the one time where a shortcut finally pays off for him? Obviously, if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing, clicking here on the left to check out that chapter review, or click here on the right to check out more videos from my other 2 anime channels where I talk about non-Naruto content.